little bit of a late night photography. There's been a little bit of rain. Checking out the 14 to 30. Love a bit of light laneway work. And of course, here we are doing a bit of vlogging. It's looking great. Loving it. Loving it.
We are looking at the 14 to 30 f4S from Nikon, shooting on the Z8 version 1.0 firmware. How exciting on high efficiency star. Now, this lens has been out a long time. It's been out since 2019. I never got round to taking a look at it, and I do own the 14 to 24 2.8S, which I also need to do a review on. But this episode is uniquely and specifically about the 14 to 30 and how impressed I am by this lens. There are images from night and there are images from day. This is literally getting the lens and the Z8 about 1 centimeter off the water to create this sort of image, but just very quickly taking a look, diving in, going to 100%. We can see that handheld at 1/6 of a second, f4 14mm ISO 640. And I have done a little bit of adjusting with these images. They are pre-adjusted. You can see how sharp that is, even handheld, one-handed, away from my body. Now, of course, it's f4. Depth of field is hard to come by, especially when your subject is that far away. But we will get to see some. Let's keep on moving. Here's another image shot at ISO 640, 1/6 of a second, f4, 14mm. This is just luscious. The capability to walk around at nighttime, 640 ISO, that's it. And this camera, I don't know, it seems to have some dual gain action happening. I'm not sure where it's happening. I think it happens around 640 or maybe 800, but I think at 640, you get these amazing results at nighttime. Here we are at 100%. There's really not much sign of grain. There's not much penalty here. Handheld, no tripod. Focus is down the back here, so we can see that that's nice and sharp at 100%. We can go into 200%. Doesn't tell us that much because it's sharp and starting to pixelate, but it looks great. So much detail on a camera like the Z8 or the Z9. Now we come into our friend here, the cat, waving hello. Close focusing is very close, and it has a minimum focus distance of 28 centimeters, which is around about 11 inches. The front of the lens is almost on this chair, and the cat is sitting there in the middle. Is that a piece of chewing gum that they've got the cat stuck down by? Oh, that's a bit weird. Handheld, 1/6 of a second. We can see the movement in the arm, but we can just see how sharp things are there with the cat. And we actually do get some bokeh here, and the background, the out of focus areas look really sweet. They look really nice. Having a look at chromatic aberration, we can't see any here. There's the tiniest amount of maybe green fringing, maybe the smallest amount. Let's keep in mind the age of this lens because it came out in January 2019, which now makes it over 4 years old. It's actually 4.5 years old. It is one of the first Z lenses to come out. It was a great companion with the f4 24 to 70, which was a kit lens that came out on launch. My theory around Nikon adding more and more coatings over time would not necessarily apply to this lens because it is one of the oldest Z lenses. That background, though, is looking delicious, and how sharp the little cat here is, handheld, 1/6 of a second. This really shows again how powerful the Z system, the Z8, the Z9 system is. 640 ISO handheld with that IBIS unit. You can't go wrong. I mean, this really screams out that it's an amazing travel lens because you can do stuff like this. You can be anywhere, anytime, and you can get yourself an image like this. 1/6 of a second. It is dark. This is nighttime. The sun has been set for over 5 hours. The focus is on the kangaroo character here. This is where the focus was. Just looks super duper sharp. The fact that we can get in APS-C 90 degrees field of view, and in 35mm we can get up to 114 degrees of view, which is amazing. And what that means is we can see beyond 90 degrees. It allows you to just get so many possibilities which you can't normally get because it's so wide. And also it's quite uncanny how close you can get to things and still get all of them in frame. This just gives you an idea of the sort of thing that you can capture. You know, we're looking here at like a 45, 50-story building, no worries. And we're probably about 100 meters, 300 feet, 400 feet from the bottom of it. It's a good result.
1/25 f4 ISO 3200.
Another laneway in the middle of the night. I've worked on this a little bit. I think it's too bright now that I've come back to it. I think we could drop it back to here somewhere. But again, it just shows how much you can push these files and they don't look pushed at all. It's just uncanny. This is extremely close quarters. This laneway might only be something like 10 feet, 12 feet, 3 or 4 meters wide. And you can just get this amazing landscape. I mean, this is literally a landscape, this great open area because this lens is so wide. And it completely changes the look. I've been through these laneways before making other videos and they don't look anything like this. It just looks nothing like this. So it really gives you a new opportunity at 14mm. And what's amazing about this lens, it is f4, but it's super duper high quality. I mean, we can see it here, right here where the focus is, in the center here. It's only around about 450 grams, somewhere around there, and you just get so much. Now, the windows we were just looking at, this is what is in those windows. This is a bar. Everything was on. The music was playing, the dance floor lights were going, everything was happening, completely empty. And I think this was around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Now, to give you an idea, this is handheld at half a second. Another image could be less bright, but again, here we have half a second, handheld, 640, and these are the results. These are the results. This is an absolute keeper. Focus is down the back here somewhere, and that is all looking sharp. We are at 100%. So half a second at 100%, and you're turning night into day. I just love it. I love the capabilities of this lens and the opportunities that this lens provides. The Beer Keg Test. You know how I love beer kegs. They just look so cool. They're shiny, they're sharp, they have contrast. It's actually a great way to see how well a lens renders. These are rendered beautifully. Now we can see they are a little bit distorted. This is because I was super duper close to them. I think I was probably something like 2 feet, 50 centimeters, extraordinarily close. So yes, there's a little bit of distortion. Of course, as we get to the edges here, that's okay. That's expected when you're just so close and something straight is on the edge of frame. Although if we look at this line here, we can see that's in pretty good shape, but there is a small amount, I think a small amount of distortion there. Not sure how much Capture One is correcting this or not. But what we can see here is color is rendered beautifully, texture, contrast, focus, everything looks absolutely sumptuous. And if we go into 100% and check all of this out, it's just here. And it looks great. Handheld at 1/4 of a second. Another 1/4 of a second, around about the same spot. And again, it just creates this whole other opportunity, this whole other landscape can be found when you have a lens that's this wide. It's just cool. 640 ISO, 1/5 of a second, f4. Very, very dark. This was dark. This was basically in the shadows over here on the right, even with the human eye, as it had adjusted a fair bit to the darkness of the city. This is still a result. I love this. It's moody. It looks great. And in at 100%, everything's sharp. The textures are beautiful. Just look over here where this glass and pencil is. This is the power. This is the capability you can have with, say, a Z8 and this lens. A pretty small package, just over 1 kilogram in total weight, around 1,200 grams. It's a really good combo if you're traveling. This is the very famous Hosier Lane, famous for its walls always being covered in graffiti. Sometimes they're murals and they're actually being commissioned, and sometimes it's graffiti. It's not always that easy to tell. Now, critical focus is here, and we can see it is falling gently out of focus as we go up the hill. We can also see here that lines are pretty straight. So if you get your horizon in the right spot, these verticals should be vertical. And we can see over here on the left, they're pretty vertical. Handheld, 640 ISO, 1/15 of a second. The camera jumped to person detect and the focus point moved 2 or 3 meters to the right. And we can actually see in this frame that much more along here is in focus simply by moving the focus from here to here. But that was moving it from something like 3 meters to something like 5 meters, 10 feet, 9 feet out to 15 feet, something like that. And that makes enough of a difference that it's opening up the background and giving you not completely in focus, but more in focus. You can just see here at 100% how much detail there is in the wall, in the textures, in the colors, 1/13 of a second. Glorious stuff. I love this stuff. And I don't think I've ever photographed this laneway with anything wider than a 24mm, except for when I came in here with my Hasselblad, which was an equivalent to 14mm, but I had to do it on a tripod because it can't be used handheld. It doesn't have in-body stabilizer. You can't do any of this stuff. It's got to be on a tripod. It's got to be something like an 8-second exposure. It's at something like 5.6, and it was a different shot. The interesting thing is this result is not that different. Maybe I should try and recreate what I did with the Hasselblad with the Z system, and we can see how close they are. And it might also be interesting to have a go with my 60 megapixel Hasselblad versus, say, the Z8 or the Z9. That would be a really interesting video. Let me know in the comments below if that would be something that you'd be interested in. I certainly would. Hard yakka, but interesting. Straight onto the wall. My back's to the wall. This laneway is probably a total of 5 meters, 15 feet wide. It just shows how much this lens can take in. It's absolutely glorious. Look on the edges, look on the left and the right, and we can see it straight. Whether that's being done in post-production, in camera, however that's being done, it looks good. The pixels look good. The color looks good. The center of frame looks amazing. And even as we go out to the edges, it still looks amazing. This is 1/4 of a second, and I reckon I'm getting a little bit of camera shake here on that image. This one does not look like it's got camera shake, and it looks quite different. I think I cranked the color and the contrast a bit too hard there. Let's just drop it back. Let's subtle those things up a little bit. That's still knocking your socks off. Definitely that previous image had a little bit of camera shake. There's no question about it. And you can just see, because of how much more contrast is here, when you have a bit of camera shake, it creates a bit of blur. It actually removes contrast. This is all tight as, and what a result. Handheld. 1/4 of a second, nighttime. Let's have a look over here on the edge of frame. Oh, yeah, look, I think that is softening off a little bit. There's no question of it, but I think we are shooting this lens wide open. We are shooting it handheld. There even could be just a slight amount of warping. The IBIS unit might be moving. Obviously, it moves more on the edges than it does in the middle, so it's hard to know exactly what's happening there. And maybe another video is required to test that sort of stuff. You know I like testing these systems in the worst case scenario, so you know they can only get better than what they're doing right now. Let's have a look over on this side. Oops, we're at 200. I don't really want to be at 200% because it doesn't give me sharp pixels for sharp pixels. That's looking pretty good. I reckon on the other side it was actually focus related and not movement related at all. I would say everything through here is pretty sharp. Even here it's still looking pretty sharp. Now, you would have seen in the opening of this video, the video that I shot of this same location. There was a bit more light here, so we're at 1/10 of a second. And I think with a lens like this, once we get to 1/10 of a second, we are pretty assured that everything will be sharp handheld as long as it's not moving. And you're not moving, you're containing your movement and engaging in best practices, keeping your elbows into your chest, perhaps leaning against a wall, even holding your breath as well. All of these things can help. This looks super duper sharp to me. I think we can see a little bit of stretching going on here on the Movida sign as we get towards the edge. We can see here is straight though. On both sides, this is very close to straight with the slightest amount of distortion perhaps Let's get to 100%. I'm not seeing signs of chromatic aberration. I do shoot some daytime shots that are coming up shortly, directly into the sun, and there is a small amount. In these situations, we've got bright lights, high contrast. It seems to be being contained here, which is awesome. And there's just so much detail. Look at that. All the way through the restaurant, past the bar, into the kitchen. We can even see what's going on in the kitchen.
1/25 f4, 1600 14mm.
Focus point is in the distance on the far wall, and even these closer walls at the closest areas here, which are very close. The difference between here and the other end is probably something like 15-20 meters, which is 45, 50 feet and beyond. It's still looking pretty sharp as we get to sort of this area. So from here on, it's nice and sharp. Here back, it is not so much. Here's some amazing creatures created in Fed Square. They kind of look like something out of an anime film, and they're just really beautiful, giant illuminated things, sort of bigger than a car, bigger than a couple of cars, not quite as big as a bus, hanging from the ceiling and illuminated. And this is a reflection. This is the Forum. It's an enormous building, 6, 7, 8 stories tall. And I'm just on the other side of the road. The road is not that wide. It's like the equivalent to, say, 6 lanes if you include the tram lines. Maybe it's 8 lanes. And I'm able to get such a wide frame. Now, obviously it's distorted. Of course it is. I don't think keystoning will work because it's going to be too much. But let's see how far we can take it. Might get more out of it than I thought. Oh, jeez, we're not going to make it, but that's it. That's as far as we can take it with keystoning. Pretty cool. It does look a little bit weird. I don't think a tilt shift lens would do that. Another video I could make is taking out my tilt shift, my 24mm tilt shift lens and this lens, and seeing what you can get in camera versus what you can get with post-production. But that is certainly right there. That is quite different. Tell me, which do you prefer? Which version of this image do you prefer? I wonder if we can go further if we crop in. Let's have a look. They won't let us keep, let's type in 100. 75 is where it's at. It's pretty amazing, and the way this software writes these algorithms, I don't know, it's pretty impressive. We can see right up in the corner here a light and flaring and movement. Very harsh, very harsh. It's right in the corner of frame of an ultra wide lens, handheld, 1/6 of a second. I still think the overall image is absolutely awesome.
1/25 f4, ISO 1600. We're at 14mm.
Half a second, handheld, looking across the train tracks at 640 ISO, so it's not very noisy. You've still got a lot of dynamic range. There it is at 100%. I think it's wow. The focus is back here in the distance. We are in the middle of winter, right in the depths of winter, so the sun is low in the sky. Actually have only seen the sun once in about the last 2 weeks because there's been so much rain and cloud. 200% here. We can see all these fine areas. There is some purple fringing here. Now let's see what happens when we do that. Might have made a minor impact. But this is, the sun is right in the middle of frame. You can tell by what the clouds are doing that the sun's right in here in the middle. I think that's a pretty amazing result. This is what it looks like at 100%. So here is kind of the level of purple fringing with ultra high contrast, ultra fine. I couldn't be doing anything more difficult or more annoying for camera and lens. Look, I think that's a pretty good result without any work being done by me. Now I can do that work of throwing that slider across there. Honestly, it's all but non-existent at 100%. At this point, considering how harsh this is. Not only travel lens, not only a great family lens, but it's a great architectural lens. The amazing Federation Square, which I love so much. I love the shapes, the forms, the textures. The sun is in the middle of frame here. It's not quite, it's still behind this building, but you get a feel for it. You can see I've been pushing down the highlights here because I wanted to get some cloud definition. Pushing the highlights too far can be a bad thing. Here is what these creatures look like during the day. That was the creature reflected in the window. And this thing is enormous. And this is the power of this 14mm lens that we can just see so much. Beautiful rendition, f4, 1/8 of a second, handheld during the day, 64 ISO, 100%, lots of detail. If you're ever in Melbourne, go to Chocolate Buddha at Fed Square. It's been there the whole time Fed Square's been open, which is 20 years, give or take. And I went there for years, hadn't been there since before COVID, and it's just as good, if not better than ever. Now, these images were taken a little bit like I was a tourist. My family and I, my wife and my 2 kids, we decided to ride our bicycles into the city. I had the Z8 and the 14-30 strapped to my hip using the Peak design coupling equipment along with a belt scenario that they have. It worked super well for cycling. And then we parked our bikes and we walked into the depths of the city and we came across interesting places like this. This has had minimal adjustment. I've brought up the shadows a little bit, but here I've brought them down. Tiny bit of saturation. Very difficult to photograph because it's so big. The 14mm, as we can see, it can handle it. This is a pretty tough shot to get because there's no space, but at 14mm, 1/25th of a second, handheld, I love this shot. Look at the detail. Look at how gorgeous that all looks. And if we zoom in to 100%, you can see it's all there. Look at all of the detail. The croissants, the pastries, the strudels. It's just so good. And now I need to go and eat something. The book, the glasses. I've done nothing special here. I brought down the highlights just to keep these areas because it was slightly overexposed, under control. That's it. Haven't even added any color. The capabilities of this lens, and again, the quality that you can get at 640 ISO, which is something like 3.5 stops from your base ISO, but you're still getting extraordinary ISO performance. How's that work? It's so good. And we happen to be walking past my old gallery. There it is. There's my sign. My sign is still there. A year later, it's still there, but I hear it's going to be taken down soon, so I will make sure I get to keep my sign for the next gallery that I open one day. And there's my old staircase here that led up to my gallery, which was on the 2nd floor. It was an amazing 8 years. I first opened my gallery in the city of Melbourne in 2008. So I'd been trading in the city for something like 14 years with a short break of 1.5 years where I went out to Fitzroy. It's a long time. And if you look very closely, this cafe actually took some of my images to put on the walls. Those coffee tables is one of my images. And that one there is another huge canvas, another one of my images. There's more retail love. Here is a 19.5mm at 1/200th of a second at ISO 640 shot of a beautiful shop in the Royal Arcade in the city. And there's my book. These guys stock my stuff and they sell tons of my little book. And there's my big book. The little book sells more because this is a great tourist destination. Lots of tourists come through here and the little book makes more sense. And not only do they sell my book, but all of these greeting cards up here are my greeting cards. I think they've got a selection of something like 50 greeting cards and 25 postcards. I have closed my gallery, but there are a number of stores, this being the one that has the widest range of my merch in the city. That's cool. Now, we are not in New York. Sal's authentic New York pizza, well, it just had to be. Plus, it shows how cool the lens is. The sun was going to set. We needed to do the 10-kilometer ride back, or we were going to be stuck in the dark without lights on our bikes, and that's not necessarily fun. But again, you can just see what this lens does, how sharp it is. So good. As we were heading back, we came across this awesome waterway viaduct under a road, and I just loved all the textures and the colors and the light and the bright. In all sorts of situations, doesn't really matter. 640 ISO, 1/4 of a second, 19.5mm. I gotta say, I think this lens is pretty awesome for the price, size, weight. Now, of course, it is an extending lens. So when you zoom it, it's extending beyond its normal barrel. And there's just a very clear distinction between lenses that are sealed and lenses that extend. And it's a pretty simple equation. Do you want the smallest and lightest zoom? Well, it extends outside of the barrel when you use it. Do you want the absolutely toughest and most weather sealed that you can get? Well, you have it all interior, but it will make the lens larger. So that's one point to consider about this lens. Of course, it is an f4, but beyond that, I can't really think of many negatives. As we've already discussed, it is one of the first Z lenses. I suspect it was something like number 5, number 6, something like that, coming out in January of 2019. But more importantly, I get out there and I photograph all this stuff so you can see what this lens does in various situations. It shoots pretty close, it shoots very wide. This level of quality goes through the entire range of the lens. I know I didn't shoot it much at 30mm, but that's simply because around 30mm there are so many options, of course, because all the 24 to 70s, 35mm, etc, etc. We've got so many lenses in that range. We only have 2 native Z lenses at 14mm. As I discussed recently with my dear friends Greys of Westminster, we would all like to see some wider prime Z lenses. 12mm, 14mm, 16mm, 15mm. Give us some wide, maybe small, maybe not too big, not too expensive, maybe not 1.2s. Is it even possible to do a 14 1.2? I have no idea. Perhaps not. So that's why you've seen this lens mostly at 14mm, a couple of 19 and 20mm, but it looks like this the whole way through the range. More importantly, what do you think? I would love to hear what you think about this lens. Is this a lens you have? I suspect a lot of people have it because it's been around a long time. Is this maybe a lens that you would consider? I certainly may well consider taking this lens on my next big trip, because it is smaller and lighter, and of course I can see here that it still allows me to shoot at night in the dark and get all the types of shots that I like to get, and of course it's going to work fine during the day because we are not pushing the envelope in the same way. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. It's been so good to see you, and if this is your first time here, I would love to see you again, so please do subscribe, please share, and please like. Alright, bye for now.